There we go. I just wanted to make sure we had enough time for everyone to jump in. I am so excited to be here with my friend Basil. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you in just a minute. But I already see people jumping in on multiple platforms, which is pretty awesome. So this is exciting. And we have an awesome topic we're going to be talking about tonight. Talking about social emotional learning and trauma of marginalized students. And there's a lot that we're going to unpack here. But before we do, I just want to hand this over to my awesome guest and let him introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hey, Chuck, first and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on here live with you. This is my first live, so now I get to say I've done it, right?
All right.
So in terms of my credentials, I am an assistant principal at Chamblee Charter High School here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I love the work that we're doing here at the school. I'm currently president-elect for the Emerging Leader affiliate within ASCD. But the most important credential for me is that I am a disruptor of the status quo. And I think that has such a deep kind of resounding meaning during this time in our country. That I've always been about the work of equity. If you know me and know what I stand for, that's been something that's dear to my heart for a while. But I think the world is open, eyes and ears are open on a different level right now to receive the message that needs to be heard.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I am so happy that you're here to help share your insight and your wisdom in this area. Because it's just going to be something like you had said. I think everyone's eyes, ears are open, and you know, really just searching. And I love the fact that you are here to talk to us all about it. So I really want to dive in, I guess, right away. And I know that you are going to talk about some great stuff in social emotional learning and trauma and things like that. But I'm just going to basically hand it over to you. I might chime in occasionally, but I want to hear what you have to say and learn from you as well. So the floor is yours, and I'd love for you to just start sharing with us.
Thanks, Chuck. And right now I have notes. Okay, so if anybody's watching, just know that my dad is a Baptist minister. So I have my notes to keep me on task. But I want to cover a lot of things today with you all to kind of talk about what SEL is and how it is affecting our marginalized kids. Right now, for anyone watching, if you do not know the SEL standards, I urge you to go to castle.com and to look at the 5 standards. And the 5 standards are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And all of these pillars are affecting our babies right now. They're affecting our kids. And what does it mean to make responsible decisions? What does it mean to build a relationship with a teacher through Zoom? What does it mean to have social awareness of what's going on in my community and in the world at large? But then also, how do I then regulate myself during that time when I'm having my questions and things that are unresolved within me? How do I resolve those things? So those are some of the tools that as educators, it is a task right now, but it's a task that needs to be done. And so for me, I implore educators right now is that I need you to be uncomfortable. Well, I need you to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. This is a time where, typically we're so used to going back from the summer and we know our role, we know what we're supposed to be doing as educators, whether you're a teacher, assistant superintendent, like you kind of know your role. And right now our roles are kind of still undefined. There's still school divisions right now that are deciding, are we going to be fully blended? Are we going to be a hybrid? Are we going to be, fully virtual? And so what does that mean for me as a teacher? And then you think about some of the kids, I'm at the high school level, you have some 9th graders who are coming to high school for the first time. And so, how do you build community and build a relationship with those kids who've never been there? And, you're so used to having your orientations and, your back to school nights. Those things should be happening. That's going to look a little different, right? So how do we keep these kids involved and keep our staff involved for the work that needs to happen? Excuse me. But I want to go back to the social emotional and trauma. Our students, our staff watched a young man get murdered through a cell phone, through TV. And that has shook the world. It happened at a time with COVID. I was on another podcast and someone kind of said, Basil, this has been happening. This happened over and over. Brene Brown. We have so many names, unfortunately. But why did this one hit the way it did and why did it hit so differently? And I'm here just to say that I think because it happened during COVID, the world stopped.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter whether you're making $8 an hour or whether you're a multimillionaire. The world stopped for you, and you had to kind of do some self-reflection on what's important to me and what's happening in the world, and had to think about someone other than yourself. And that's truly caused the world to stop and to ponder. And so that's, for me, like, how do we help our kids to get past that? How do we not even get past it, but to deal with it and grapple with it? Some of them have not dealt with it since March, or since when it happened. They haven't dealt with it. And so how do we help them to understand that you matter, your points matter, and we're going to help you kind of get through some of those things together?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the fact that during COVID, like that you had said, the world essentially stopped, regardless of who you are or where you may be in life, right? And it kind of, I love how you said that. It's right here. It said, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And I think that is such a amazing piece of advice. And the truth of the matter is, because of everything that's happened, where we've had to kind of stop and pause and reflect, and no matter where we are, I think that it's such a key thing that that you're saying, that this is something that now, more than ever, like, it's just, hey, here it is, and let's do this.
Right. And I would say to that, Chuck, too, like, when we get back in our classrooms, whether you're teaching, literature, history, how do you open up that space for you to have in classroom conversation? I think so much, as educators, so much time we want to push the conversation away and say, I have to stay to the curriculum. That's not within my scope of things. But we have to have that conversation. Like, as an educator, it's our job to educate. And even though you might not have the answers, it's your job to open up that space for the kids to have that dialogue with one another respectfully, but also with you as an educator. And I always think that, learning is a two-way street. And so even as educators, we can learn from our kids. Even the most vulnerable kids in our classroom, we can learn something from them and take something away from them as well. And so that's important to have that two-way street. But we have to open up our arms and our Zoom rooms and our classrooms for those conversations, because kids, they want answers, and they want to know, how will this impact me in my next 5 or 10 years? How am I to be, be reckoning with this as a student? And so the next point I want to kind of go into is, as educators, we have to recognize and acknowledge that the system that we're currently in right now was not created for our students of color. And so what's crazy about that is to think about all the barriers that are there for students of color. Cultural barriers that are there. Then you have our language barriers for some of the students who have language, ELL students are coming from a different country. I don't even understand your system of school because I'm coming from a whole different country. Yeah. How does that impact me as a student? And then we have social class barriers that are there. Again, back to affluent to the not. And then again, whether you're a Title I school, whether you're a non-Title I school, those barriers affect students and how they perceive themselves. The achievement gaps that are happening, again, between students of color and non-students of color, and the things that are happening within the school, that truly has impacted our students, and they can feel that, and they can sense when, I'm valued in this space or I'm not valued in this space. And then you have teacher expectations. But I'll be honest, teachers have these teacher lounge conversations. Definitely not teacher success lounge, right? Well, teacher lounge in our schools, that they're having these conversations, and they'll talk about kids. Oh, I had Freddie. He was a tough kid in 4th grade. He got up next year. Bless you. Like, we have our biases that we then bring to the classroom, and we expect that kid to tear it up. So now we're already against them, right? And those expectations affect those kids. And then you have all these things that I listed, and on top of all of that, you had COVID, right? So how are you impacting the kids who, when they came into your classroom and put their hood on after lunch and went straight to the back seat and didn't speak the whole class, and when the bell rang, they went out of class? How do you deal with that type of student who now is not even clicking on your Zoom link? They're not clicking into your Google Doc. They're not going into your Verge. They're just absent. Like, how, there was kids who were struggling, Chuck, before pre-COVID, and those kids are struggling extremely right now. So how do we help those kids? And so we kind of rebuild the plane as we were flying it, kind of like, last spring, but now we're starting fresh. The plane's on the ground, and now we're about to take off again. So, like, what do we do, knowing what we know now, to help those kids to be successful? Yeah,
I have to say, I actually really listening to you was awesome. I'm listening to all of this, and then that plane analogy actually is brilliant, right? It's kind of like we landed the plane, we're now on the ground, but now it's going to take off, right? And obviously, we're in a situation where we don't want to take off the way we landed, right? Because the plane's going to crash. It's inevitable, right? So that really it was awesome. Like, I was just thinking about that now. It kind of put this picture in my mind. But that's my question. Yeah, like what do we do? Like what can we do moving forward?
Absolutely. So let me I want to explain one more thing kind of to the research before I kind of get to some of the strategies. But one thing I want people to think about is there's some research again out of Berkeley talks about adverse student experiences, or ACEs. And a lot of times when we're talking about marginalized kids or students, they have experienced ACEs. And some examples for you all listening are physical, sexual, and mental abuse. You have physical neglect, incarceration in the family, whether it's a parent or a loved one, or even the child themselves have been incarcerated. And then you have drug usage in the family. And those things have caused divides, and they cause kids to really go through some trauma and affects them in their educational experience. And so I've listed some of the barriers already for you, but those kids are coming in. I think I believe the research says that 50% of marginalized kids, I know it's more than that, but at least 50% are coming in with at least one ACE into your classroom. And then you have a smaller realm of students who are coming with 4 or 5 ACEs. And so I was listening to a podcast this past week that talked about everyone in America experienced an ACE, no matter whether you're high poverty, whether you're an at-risk child. Like teachers experience ACEs, administrators experience ACEs, superintendents, we all experienced it. So now we have to try to pick the pieces up and kind of move forward. And so how do we do that? You spoke about these kids who have all these barriers, and then they have these ACEs, and then now they have COVID on top of that. That has really impacted these kids. So what's our job as educators to kind of unpack the layers and figure out how is it best for us to serve these kids and to help them be successful. And so really, like, some of the questions I kind of want to ask the listeners are, and I was listening to Principal Kafele today. He did an awesome keynote for ASCD this morning or this afternoon about kind of SEL and how do we helping kids. And some of the questions he posed I want to share today are so timely. He asked, do we as educators engage students in conversation about encouragement, or are we just having conversation about instruction? And one of the examples he gave was, are you teaching math or are you teaching Matthew? Right. And so we have to know our kids, and we have to know like what their needs are. Right. And yes, we all have our curriculums. Yes, we all have end of course testing and assessments and AP testing and all of that. But at the end of the day, like, we have to know what's going on with our kids. And the only way you can do that is through relationships. You have to know what's going on with our kids before they kind of let you know what's going on. Kind of the best way I can explain it to you is kind of like an egg. There's some eggs where on the outside of the shell, you see the cracks. I mean, it's evident that there's cracks and there's damage and there's things going on. And it's kind of easier in a sense, if you allow me to say that, to kind of give supports to that child because you can see it. But then there's a lot of kids who have a solid shell, but the cracks are on the inside and you can't see it. And the only way you're going to be able to drill down is if you have a relationship with that kid and they're going to share with you, this is what I'm going through. This is what my family's going through. My mom has cancer. They'll explain these things to you, and it gives you a better scope, Chuck, as how to be a better educator to that kid. And so definitely, I love that part. Again, I give my credit to Principal Kafele about, are you speaking about encouragement to kids or instruction? And I will tell educators listening, like, you have to have, it's a dual role, and I get you kind of double dutching. You're going to have that conversation about encouragement before the kids can even receive your instruction. Like that's just the reality we're at. So you do need to have both. I just want to be clear. The next one is, are you knowledgeable about the student's home environment? Chuck, we have a lot of kids who are living in hotel rooms. They kind of have the 2 rooms that they kind of split between. You have 4 or 5 family members living in a hotel room. We have kids who don't have the correct technology, right? We have a lot of families where they're homeless right now because of what's going on with COVID. I mean, I know we have the CARES Act, but they may be living out of their car because they've now got evicted. We have families who haven't eaten in weeks. These are things impacting our kids. And how are we going to help these kids to kind of get out of this gloom and doom? I mean, the equities were there, Chuck, before this. Let's just be real. Yeah. But COVID has really shone a light on what's going on, so people are able to see it kind of at a different level. But these inequities have already been there in our schools and our communities. They've been there. So how do we help these students to get that? And then the last thing I'll say was, like, do you know the dependency that some of your kids are having on, like, school lunch? I mean, as an administrator over attendance at my school, you don't know how many times I saw kids come into the middle of the school day at like 12:15, I say, I'm saying, I'm glad you're here. I know it's a kid who really school's not for them, and they go straight from coming in to getting the tardy pass to going straight to the cafeteria to get lunch. Like, did you just come to school today to get lunch?
Yeah.
Right. And then now you go into the rest of your classes. Like, that's a real phenomenon, Chuck. Like, if some of our educators don't understand that, they're just like, oh, like, he just comes late all the time. Like, there's always excuses. Like, he might be the breadwinner of his family. And he just worked an 8-hour shift all overnight to make sure that his family has food on the table, and now he's coming to school. Like, how are we helping those kids? Right. And to help them to be successful. And so I know you asked for some strategies about how do we make that happen. And so I definitely want to share some of those now. And I want to say this before I start, though, Chuck, it's not a 5 EV step, pyramid scheme layout. If you're looking for that, you're in the wrong live, because it's hard work. And I always say you have to do the hard work before you do the hard work. And I know I have my good friend, Dr. Tracy, up here, and Tara, and I have some people who are watching, Matt and Taylor. They know I say that all the time. You have to reach the kids in the heart before you can do the hard work. Some examples of some things you can do is sending postcards. Right. And sending postcards to your students and letting them know that you care about them, and just making that simple note saying, like, I care about you, you matter. If there's anything you need, this is my email address or whatnot. Letting those kids know, like, wow, they took the time to send me something and let me know that I matter. And you can do that even now in the summertime. Right. Start building some of those relationships. I would even say, we know our most challenging kids need those, but our kids who are brand new to you as well as a teacher. Again, I'm in the high school level. If you know you're going to have 9th graders, they're not going to be able to see you but through the small little Brady Bunch window. And that's a different understanding of you as a teacher. So how are you going to create that opportunity for that kid to get to know you, and then you get to know them? I would say the next thing is, I know we create, Zoom rooms or Google Classrooms for instruction, but I will also kind of say where you create Zoom rooms or Google Classrooms just for connection. You can just call it Connect, weekly Connect. And kids just come in there and just kind of hang out, and you can just, and they know you're going to be there as a teacher, but you can just hear conversation. You don't know how much you're going to learn about kids just by listening. Right. You can have maybe 4 or 5 questions. You kind of direct the conversation at first, but let kids kind of open up. And letting those kids have an opportunity to speak and be free, but also let them engage, but then let you engage with them. So I think that is another way to be able to reach those kids. Another big thing for me is I work a lot with this ELL population at my school and kids who are struggling, Chuck, and you know that. And so, previous to COVID, it was like a no to give out your number to kids or to give to parents. Like, we just didn't do that. And so I realized that I had to find another way to reach my families. Like, the standard we were doing before obviously wasn't working. Yeah. So what am I going to do? So 2 things I use that help me, and I definitely think will help educators upcoming year, is creating a Google Voice number. If you create a Google Voice number, it's attached to your number, but people who receive a text message or a call they don't know your number. And that's a hotline where we can either create an ELL hotline with the translators for them to have the access, or again, to have access as you as an administrator. I have a group in my school called My School Sons, and it takes the mentorship level to a whole nother level, right? I mean, we always have men of excellence or these great cubs, but I gave a level of My School Son because it takes a step further and says, like, no, you're my son. I can never replace your father, and they know that. But I want to give you this level of support that you don't have. And so all My School Sons have my Google Voice number. So if they need something, they can contact me. So I say Google Voice is huge, but you also have What's Up app, and that also allows people to connect. And so that's another huge, I think, help for educators moving forward, is you got to open up pathways for people to connect with you and to get information. I heard the superintendent say, you got to tell your story before someone else tells your story. So allow people to communicate with you before they turn it around to the news or to Facebook and say they can't reach anybody and then nobody's answering emails. Like, create your own narrative and how you can control that before you can kind of get in the situation. I would say next, Chuck, is like communications. As I just now said, there are plenty of families who do not have hotspots. So like, are they aware? A lot of times the miscommunication with marginalized families, they're just not aware of the communication. They don't know where to get it. So are there hotspots available? Are there Chromebooks available? And then if there are, how do I get it? Right. And again, if you have, I spoke about language barriers earlier. A lot of my school's 30% ELL. If I can't reach a translator, if I can't talk to someone about what I need, I might have the number, but that's as far as I can go because I can't do anything else with it. So making sure that communications are open and are 2-way for all of our students. that is huge. And so if they're able to know where to get it from, they have translation. Again, there are a lot of apps for translation as well. You'll be able to help kids understand what they need and give them information so that they can have what they need to be successful. The next point I would say, Chuck, is really having those translators available too. If you're a multilingual school, you got to have translators on deck. Because that's huge. It's paramount in terms of hearing the parents' concerns, but also relaying that to teachers. And then that way that kind of bridges the gaps. And something I have at my school is coffee and conversation. Every month we had a meeting where the EL parents came in and were able to kind of voice their concerns. I would share good things that's happening in the school, but it's also kind of also educating them on the American educational system, because they just didn't know. And again, when you, I love Maya Angelou. When you know better, you do better. So giving them that education they needed is kind of like a parent university. That was huge too. So maybe if you don't have EL population, you can create a parent university for your parents of kids who just are maybe disconnected with the school. Maybe your kids already that had some behavioral issues last year, already getting ahead of the ball and saying, hey, we have a parent university. And you don't have to make it about discipline. You can just say, we want to offer this opportunity for parents to get involved and give a voice. And that will help those families to be involved. I know I share a lot, Chuck, but I just want to kind of give some of those strategies to help some people.
No, yeah, I love it. I think they're fantastic, right? I mean, I'm looking in the comments, even looking back, there was some questions and people, and I know that you hit on a lot of them. I think one, for instance, with Tracy, she said, how do you deal with a student who isn't even clicking on a Zoom link when we do that, right? Or how can we help those students to be successful? It's a great question. I agree. I think part of that would obviously be able to do a lot of these strategies that you were saying, but with the connections and relationships. And but I'll give you that question. What would you say to Tracy with that particular question?
So I say, how do you eat an elephant? You got to take small bites, right? So for Dr. Smith, I would say, for that child, it's it would be probably calling that child and just saying like, hey, where are you at right now? What are you experiencing? You got to know what's going on with that child. And once you kind of get a greater scope of what's going on, again, somebody in the family might have COVID. That kid might be working. Again, if it's an elementary kid, I mean, I'm at the high school level, it might be a little different. But I think you have to start small. If we have 4 or 5 assignments, you might just say, hey, Zach, I know we had 5 assignments we did this week, but can you maybe do 1 or 2 this week? And again, one of the things I'll talk about at the end, but having compassion over compliance. Like, we have to meet people where they're at. And so I would say to Dr. Smith, like, meeting that kid where they're at, understanding them. And it's kind of like that growth mindset. Once we see that kid have a little bit of success, it might be that kid has anxiety and doesn't even want to start it because I'm scared of failure. Right. And so we show that kid some success on the 1 or 2 worksheets, and then we kind of tear it up and say, you know what? Okay, now maybe we can do 3 next week. And we kind of just show that kid success, but it's being able to work with them along the way. There are a lot of educators out here, Chuck, that will say, I give out 5 assignments. If you don't do 5, you have 0. And that's gonna be detrimental to the kids we're talking about right now on the show. You have to show them success, even as adults. Right. I'm working right now on losing some weight. So I've been trying to do some things, go to Planet Fitness and keep myself, safe. But the thing is, if I don't see myself losing weight, why am I going to continue to do it? Right. So even for our kids, like, if they don't see success, they're not going to want to do it. What is the purpose of it? Why am I doing this? What is it going to do for me in the long run? So again, you have to, I would say, going back to knowing your kids and going back to that point, are we teaching Matthew or are we teaching math? We got to know our kids. You got to know their name and you got to know what they need. And it's not a cookie cutter way of doing everything. Every child, if you're really doing differentiation instruction in your class, you'll know that every child needs something different. Yeah. So that's what I would say to that question, Chuck, is it's getting to know your kids, scale it back a little bit, meet them where they're at, and then you kind of push them forward and say, hey, we got this.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think, and I really wanted to bring that up because I think what Dr. Smith was doing, she was putting that question out that you would address. And I really wanted to hit that because I think that's so important because it's such a strong thing for us to really understand how to do. And I like how you broke that down. Taylor has an interesting question. He says, what do you think is the best way we can support our teachers so they can in turn support students, right? Because there's so many they have so many areas of need as well. Myself being a teacher, I understand, like, I'm still in the classroom, right? And I know that, I've had colleagues reach out to me saying, like, what are we going to do? And I'm saying, I'm on the same page as you. Like, we have great administrators and they're trying to figure things out, but what would you say to Taylor with that question?
That's a good question, and I'm glad Taylor brought it up. And as we were kind of speaking before we got on live, Chuck, that I always speak about SEL does not have an age limit. A lot of times when I'm at conferences, a lot of times the speakers will say, well, oh, little Timmy, and we're talking about little kids, but please understand that your teachers are going to be coming in with their own baggage because of this, right? And so understanding that we got to, as Dr. Smith is saying, we got to build trust. We got to get to know so the same strategies that I've given you for the kids, like we're going to have to do it with our adults. Reach out to them in the summer, not giving them a task, but just saying, hey, how are you? Maybe creating a Google Doc where you're asking some questions about, is there anything I can do as administrator to help you during this time during the summer? And maybe having it where people know it can be private so they can be real and answer the questions real and no one else can see them. I think, again, having kind of like a virtual teacher lounge, or you really can't call it happy hour, but having a space for teachers to kind of come together, because they're going to have to build that community. And I think, we all talk about school improvement and culture, like those things are going to be so key this year, and pushing the needle with student achievement, but also with our teachers and helping them to be successful. So I would just say is reaching out to our teachers, understanding who they are. If you've been in your building a while and you kind of know your staff, like you kind of know who you got to touch base with at this time, who you kind of got to say, hey, I'm here for you. If you're a brand new principal, it's some work to be done, and you got to get to know your staff at a fast pace. But it's that work that has to be done. It's going to be very overwhelming. I know you're getting a lot of district mandates from your district and from your state about what's opening and not. But I promise you, if you get to know your people, that's going to pay dividends in the long run. Because something I told someone else today at the ACD conference was, typically a lot of your staff are recharged somewhat when they come into the school year. Chuck, people are going to be coming into the school year on half, right, already. So, like, how are you going to get those batteries to be recharged and keep them going out throughout the year, and continue to, and not only just for the students, but for the teachers. And I would say this is kind of a plug right now for SEL for self-care. If you do not practice self-care, please listen to this wholeheartedly and understand, take care of yourself, go for walks, take care of your family. Like you have to take care of yourself. And I always say you cannot pour from an empty cup. You have to make sure that you have what you need to help others. And so I would say if that's reading books, if that's doing PD, whatever it is for you, yoga, find what you need, because you're going to need that to get you through before you can help these kids who are going to have, their challenges and issues, and then your colleagues along with you. So that self-care is huge. But Taylor, I would just say some of the same strategies with the staff members are the same ones you're using for your kids. Is like, you got to meet them where they're at. And you gotta have that compassion and grace with them, because people are coming with a lot. But I also feel like if they feel like you care and they understand that you care, and you're creating these spaces for the virtual teacher lounge. I would also say create a COVID task force where you are allowing different voices from your community to be heard. That is down to students, that is to teachers, that is to parents, and making sure that they're being heard and at the table. Because if the teachers know they have a spokesperson at the table, then they know some of their values are going to be met. I mean, we're not going to make everybody, 100% happy, but they know they're going to be heard. And that also allows them to kind of feel like a little bit of a relief of, okay, they're going to hear us, because it impacts us as well as educators. Yeah.
No, I love it. And I think I totally agree with all of that, right? Because it's such a difficult time to kind of navigate through, right? And just like you were hitting on with teacher self-care, right? Taking care of, or not just teacher self-care, but self-care in general. It's so important. And, it's interesting. I think that a lot of people now are really trying to grasp and understand that. I see on Twitter and in social media, people really honing in on those things. I mean, I even have in the Teacher Success School, right? For people who are in there, we've been putting in 5-day yoga challenges or 5-day Tabata challenges that are easy, but just the goal is to, just take some time for yourself and do these things. And, people are really enjoying those things. And I think the reason why is, like you said, I think we're starting to understand how important that self-care is, right? Because if we don't take care of ourselves, how can we take care of others? So
that's it.
I think, it's awesome. But so I guess the way I'll end it today was, can you let people know how they could even dive in more with you, or any way they can connect with you? I can put that link under when this live the recorded version. I'll have those links for people to click to you. But if you want to just let them know how
Absolutely. The best way I would say connect with me is definitely on Twitter. I'm trying to learn as much as I can from Chuck about Twitter, because he is the Twitter and all social platforms guru. But you can find me at Basil Basil _ Marin Marin. That's the best way to contact me. Just follow me, and I'll love to continue the conversation about how can we help our kids to be successful. Because as I always say, iron sharpens iron, and essentially we have to link up with each other and be in this work together. No one who was ever successful in history, did it by themselves. They had a team. And so how do we as a team, and I would say this out loud. If you feel like you're a part of an administrative team or a school where maybe you're not feeling supported, then you need to tap into your PLN, your professional learning community, and get your support and get your strength, because there's no excuse not to get it. Right. And so find your tribe, find your team, and continue to do this work, but understanding that all kids deserve it. And you're in this work because I'm assuming it's your passion and you were called to this work. And so definitely for me, I would say is don't allow this to be just another webinar that you attended and said, check off your PD list, but saying like, what action steps am I really truly going to take moving forward to make sure that my most vulnerable students are getting what they need to be successful.
Awesome. Love it. So I just want to say again, though, thanks so much for taking this time to, and I really appreciate how prepared. I love the fact that you had notes ready to go. It just is so helpful, especially for, I know, people attending these types of things. Like, it's just really great that you would do that. So I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Chuck.
Of course. So so basically what we'll do is this will be recorded. The session will be ready to go in the group soon. So if anyone wants to come back, replay it, take notes, feel free to do that. It'll be up soon. So thanks again. And Basil, I know that we'll be talking soon. You actually have on our open house, your session is coming next week. So I can't wait for people to dive into it.
Yes,
That's exciting. I know they're going to have a lot of great stuff in store for them when they do that. So I'm excited for that.
Yes, sir. I'm thank you for that with that plug as well. I'm definitely excited about how do we continue the same work I'm talking about now, but again, it's planting seeds of greatness for students and helping, but also those same planting seeds for our teachers as well. I'm excited about that.
Me too. Cool. So great job tonight, Basil. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
All right.
Bye-bye.